Okay guys, welcome to the enrichment event here at START. This is the It Just Takes One campaign. Some of our students this semester have been working on the P2P, Challenging Extremism project, which is a federal government kind of push to get young people engaged in messaging, counter messaging when it comes to online presence of radical extremism, Islamic or otherwise. So our students will be presenting their project that they've been working on all semester and putting it forward for review shortly. So we'll keep up with how they do in the judging round. So the It Just Takes One campaign.
Okay, so hey guys, we have a total of 5 people in our team. Only 2 of us are here. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Marcella. I'm a current undergrad student here, and I'm also part of the Global Terrorism minor program. All of us are. And I'm doing an individual studies major in security and ethics with a concentration in the Middle East.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany. I am a senior. I am getting my degree in psychology with a minor in global terrorism, as we said. And we've been working really hard on this campaign. It started off last semester actually with one of our capstone courses. And we were asked to create a project that would be able to help a particular community, so we chose Bystanders, and that's what brings us to this point.
So just a little bit about our campaign. Like Marcella said, we were looking for ways to combat extremism using social media. So our idea was to focus on bystanders because we realized that in the field of global terrorism, there's not a lot of programs that target the family and friends of those that are being radicalized. Most of the programs are focused on the actual person themselves. So we thought about just one, which has 2 components. We have our social media component, where we try to empower people. We try to give people warning signs and teach them how to intervene correctly and look for resources. And then we also have a game that we're developing that we'll get into a little later in the presentation. So we wish to do this in 3 ways: through empathy, empowerment, and education. What we mean by empathy is just making sure that there's a community of bystanders and people can understand that you're not the only one that's going through this difficult decision, that watches your family and friends go through situations, and everyone has trouble knowing how to react to those situations. Empowerment is basically giving you guys the tools and the resources to know how to act, so you're more empowered the next time you go through a situation like this. You know exactly how to respond. And education goes along the same lines. We give you guys a lot of campus resources that we have here at UMD, and also step-by-step sort of how to deal with these situations. So the first thing we're going to talk about is empathy. So just to define a bystander, it's anyone who is present but not taking part in the situation. So it's all those people around that guy. And in particular, we're talking about family and friends of people who are becoming radicalized or involved in extremism. So these are all the bystanders that we hope to empower with our project. And the bystander effect is what we're trying to minimize. And that's just when the bystanders or individuals do not offer help when there's an opportunity. They just let it happen.
All right, so at this point in time, we are going to just randomly read a few of the stories that you've given to us. The reason that we want to do this is to help empower you all to realize that you're able to take action, you're able to really make a difference in people's lives, and we also really want to normalize the conversation surrounding bystanders. A lot of times bystander is seen as a very negative word, and so we want to kind of give the power back to the bystander and show you all that being present in a situation but not a part of it is not a bad thing. It actually gives you the opportunity to really make a difference, and you can be an unsung hero. So the first one that I have here says, when I was really little, boys were picking on my little brother. I got in between the 2 parties and told the other kids to back off and go through me first. A friend in college had sex with someone she had hooked up with prior but didn't remember it at the time. She came to me, and together we approached the guy and worked it through. My friend got creeped on by an old man at the bar, and while we were dancing, I shoved him away. I saw my friend in a bad situation with a guy in a bar and stepped in to keep her safe. So I hope that this just shows you that everybody has been a bystander in various situations. It doesn't always have to be extremely serious. However, we hope that through this presentation, you'll learn that if you're able to step in smaller situations like these, then perchance if somebody is radicalizing, you'll know how to step in there too, because the processes are very similar, and the way that you want to approach somebody tends to be much more understanding rather than confrontational, and we're going to hopefully be able to teach you a few methods to be able to do that today.
So in trying to understand the bystander community, we actually did a lot of interviews last semester with various people. So we interviewed researchers in the countering violent extremism field. We interviewed family members of people who joined ISIS in similar situations like that. And we just learned a lot of common themes of what they went through. So a common trend was that people didn't know the warning signs of radicalization, and even when they saw them, they didn't really know what to do with that information. And then also a common trend is that they just felt helpless in their roles of bystanders, and even when police or law enforcement got involved, there wasn't a lot of communication, there wasn't a lot of trust. So here are a few quotes from the people. We didn't add names because they wanted to stay anonymous, but these are things that they wished that people would have known if they're in the same situation. So first, we have make sure your friend or family member knows that you love and support them. They'll have less of a reason to turn to an unhealthy habit or lifestyle if you're there and they know you're there. So that's one. Another quote is, if it gets to the point where you don't know if what they're saying is serious, so you don't know if it's a joke or not, then involve someone or say something and definitely intervene. That's the second one. And the third one is from a researcher who studied a lot of different bystanders and their experiences. He said that most individuals that I've talked to say that they knew what was happening, but they didn't know what to do with that information, like I said. So hopefully we can help you learn these warning signs. And it's very important that you guys understand that even though an individual action seems small and insignificant, it really can go a long way, especially in a series of events, and it can mean everything to that person that you're helping. Okay. So we looked up a few research articles on the topic, and this one was written by two people from the Columbia University and NYU on why bystanders may not intervene when they face a situation. So they gave us a 5-step model. So number one, the person needs to acknowledge that something's happening. They have to know that something's happening, and if you don't know that something wrong is happening, then obviously you can't help. An example of this is when there's students in a university and their parents live a few states away, it's often difficult for them to notice that something's even up. Number two is to identify that thing that they're sleeping too much, they're becoming more isolated from their friends, as something that's bad, that's a form of emergency. So if they think this situation may be a little normal, maybe they're stressed out, maybe they're studying too much, then maybe they won't act and intervene as a bystander. Number three is that the people have to take responsibility for helping. So this is a typical bystander effect, is when people assume that someone else is going to deal with the situation. It's called diffusion of responsibility, so I don't need to act personally. Number four is deciding how to respond. So many people think, I'm not a police officer, I don't work in a government agency, I haven't been trained to deal with certain situations, so therefore maybe it's not best for me to do anything. And number five is the actual response that people take. So again, people may not have the willpower or incentive to take action. Maybe there's a big crowd, they don't want to embarrass themselves. And this is especially in dangerous situations where they could also put themselves in danger.
So now we want to show you a few ways that you're actually able to intervene. This comes from research, so this one in particular comes from a Resource for Rape Assistance program. However, we chose 2 out of their 4 suggestions that we really think applies to the situation of intervention and radicalization. So the first is a direct method, so this means addressing the situation directly. We want you to be proactive, go and actually talk to that individual. I have an example here which may or may not work. It is from the BuzzFeed video. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's called Unhealthy Relationships. And in this video, they show two girls who go on an away weekend with their significant others. And the one, her girlfriend, is extremely abusive to her, and her best friend is really picking up on this. And she takes a direct method of approach. So here she is speaking to her. I don't think that we were able to pull it up successfully, but basically here she is sitting with her best friend and saying, hey, this is not okay. The way that she's talking to you is inappropriate. The way that I've seen her pushing you around all weekend, also inappropriate. This is abuse. She says it, she doesn't try to beat around the bush. She really just says, this is an issue, you need to take care of it, I can't let you be in this situation anymore. And you'll see that she's kind of upset about it at first. She tries to deny that situation. However, eventually she comes around and she says, you know, my best friend is definitely looking at this from the right perspective, and she's happy about that her friend decided to really say something to her. Now, this is a method that delegate. So if you don't think that you're going to be able to take that action, if you don't think that you're the right person to really step in and say something, find somebody else in order to do that. So whether that be a therapist, a friend that you know is closer to them, a different family member that you think is really going to be able to get to them, or authority. You don't want to call the authorities if it's something that is minor. A lot of times people think that the only thing that they're able to do is to call the police, and they don't want to escalate it that quickly. Some of the people that we spoke to said, oh, I don't know if it's a joke, they might have just been kidding. You don't want to immediately just pull that full-on trigger. So there are a lot of different things that you can do. The example that I'm going to show you is the See Something, Say Something program. Call it system, but they decided that it was going to be taken over by DHS as an overall campaign. Here you'll see just what their main homepage looks like, and also what their exact suggestions are of what you can do. But the main and the biggest takeaway from this is that if you see something's wrong, say something. Either go to somebody else to help, get them to help out, or give them a call, call somebody else that's able to help, or go to the authorities. So you really want to point it out as quickly as physically possible, because the sooner that you're able to intervene, the better off you are. So our next example comes from the Center for Prevention of Radicalization Leading to Violence. This is a Canadian program. They list 6 things. There's another on the next page, but these are their suggestions of how you're able to take action when somebody is radicalizing towards violence. So the first, just show respect and empathy. So when you talk to somebody, you don't want to make large you accusations. You're doing this, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting other people. That makes someone feel very attacked, and their initial idea is, I need to defend myself. I need to show this person that what I'm doing isn't wrong. I need to teach them my radical ideology so that I'm able to really make a difference. So what we would like for you to do instead is to be empathetic. Say, hey, I'm noticing these things. Could you please explain this to me? Could you please talk to me about, you know, why is it that you've suddenly made this change? I think that we're able to work through this. I don't understand. After that point, now that they know that, oh, she's interested in listening to what it is that I have to say, then they'll be much more receptive to wanting to actually give you an answer. Another would be avoid calling into question or challenging that person's values. So if somebody says, you know, I hate people named Marcella, instead of saying, well, you shouldn't do that, say, okay, well, explain that to me. Why is it that you really strongly dislike people named Marcella? Because if you just initially attack their ideology, then perhaps they aren't going to be interested. They're just going to say, oh, well, I do. You should agree with me. Whereas if you really talk to them about it, then you'll be able to understand, you know, maybe they've had a lot of bad incidences with people named Marcella. So you're really able to figure out exactly what their issue is in order to be able to counteract it. Next, choose a good time and place. So if you know that that person has an exam the next day, maybe confronting them at that time really isn't in your best interest. They're going to be stressed, they're going to be on high end, they're probably feeling really anxious about that big exam, and they're not really going to want to talk to you, and so they're probably going to push you off and try to do a later time. Also, if you're in the middle of a big party, maybe saying something to them at that point in time isn't the best idea either, because they're going to feel as though you are trying to call attention to them. So saying, hey, can we meet up for coffee at this really small coffee shop where no one's going to overhear anything that we're saying? You know, that will make somebody feel a lot more comfortable and a lot less attacked. You don't want them to feel as if everybody else is going to be able to start coming in on them. That's why you should also really know your person that you're talking to. So say that you know, your best friend really doesn't like big groups, they're much more of a one-on-one person. Then calling in 3 other people to all sit down with that person across from them, they're going to feel really attacked, rather than having a much more intimate one-on-one conversation. So next, concentrate on opening up the lines of communication. Figure out how you're able to get to that information without offending them. So maybe sitting down and initially saying, hey, I saw that you were looking up bomb reports, let's talk about that. Maybe not the best idea. Maybe sit down and try to find another way to be able to get into that conversation. You don't want them to feel as though you're there to be attacking them. Again, a lot of times people try to intervene and instead they just end up attacking that person. And nobody wants to feel attacked when they're going through something. Whenever people shift to radicalized ideology, it more likely than not is because of the fact that there's been something that really put them over the edge. Maybe they were, you know, they experienced some kind of bullying recently, or maybe their family member was, you know, dragged by the police off somewhere and now they feel like I have to take action right now. And so there's always something that's really that turning point. So attacking them is just going to make whatever attack it was that put them on this course in the first place, it's just going to perpetuate that and actually make it even worse and maybe accelerate that process. Next, just be vigilant and monitor the situation. So don't attack right away. If you notice one small thing, pay attention to it, really hone in on what it is that you think is wrong, and then proceed if you notice that it happens more than once. Now, if this is something really, really serious, like they make a bomb threat or something like that, say something right away. But if it doesn't seem as pertinent, you just notice that they're suddenly more interested in learning about ISIS, for example, then you want to just pay attention. Maybe they start noticing it a little bit more. Maybe they suddenly have books. Maybe they're suddenly now, on top of having books and having spoken about it, they're being much more reclusive. Then that's when you want to take action. You don't want to be too preemptive, because if you are intervening too quickly, then again, that person is going to feel like you are just trying to jump on any little thing, and then they won't be as receptive when you come to them about something that's actually much more serious. And lastly, get help from, on their website, they say, contact us. We do not live in Canada, so that's not really an option. However, contact whoever it is that you really believe needs to be contacted, whether that's the therapist, whether that's your campus police, whether that's their families, whoever it is that you need to contact that higher authority if you think that this isn't something that you can take into your own hands. What's more important than anything is making sure that you recognize, I am not enough for this situation. If you believe that if you do not take this into your own hands, then there's going to be an issue. But you also have to recognize that not delegating to other people who are able to really handle the situation is also a really big part. Because if you think that you're able to just talk to them, it might just spiral out of control. So you really need to be on top of that and realizing when it is that you really need to hand this off to a higher power. So another researching moment was from a man named Dr. Isaac Ashkenazi, and he was quoted in an article, he gave an interview, and he listed these 5 steps for if you are in an event itself. So if an attack has just happened, how can you still be an active bystander to be able to make it so that what the terrorist was trying to do isn't going to be as bad? So number 1, stop to help. A lot of people, you'll see a lot of bystander effect videos on YouTube where people will fall down and then you'll watch as everyone just walks by them and does nothing. Don't be one of those people. Stop, help. Whether you need to, tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, I just noticed this, come over and help me because I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this alone. Do that. 2, call for support. If you notice that this person is profusely bleeding, call 911. Do not just take off your shirt and try to wrap it up yourself. They need immediate attention. 3, assist the victim. Now you can try to help them out now that you know that much better help like 911 is on their way. 4, pull the victim away. So say that you notice that there's a problem, there's a fight breaking out, or glass is still shattering. pull them out of the way. Yes, you might be putting yourself into potential fire. However, you are much more likely to get both of you out of there alive than to allow that one individual to die from those wounds. And that's really important because terrorists are trying to inflict as much damage as possible. So if you are preventing them from being able to inflict that damage, that's really hurting what it is that they were trying to do, and therefore they'll be less likely to try that again in the future if they were acting as part of an organization. And then 5, treat. So do whatever it is that you can do to help that person until the better help arrives. And these are some quotes that I thought were just very empowering from his interview. He said bystanders or immediate responders. So instead of just calling you a bystander, he's saying you're not just somebody that's on the side watching. You are the immediate responder. You are the best person in this situation to be able to take over and intervene. He says bystanders are the most important people in initial moments after an attack or other sudden incidents. Bystanders save lives. So like I was saying, you're able to really make that difference, intervene, and get them help. And then this kind of goes along with the last article. I found this while I was reading up about Dr. Ashkenazi's work. So this is talking about how people tend to propagate a terrorist message without really realizing this. How is this part of intervention? Well, while they've already perpetrated an attack, you're still able to prevent them from wanting to do more. Like I said, the terrorist message is trying to instill as much fear as physically possible. If there are large numbers of deaths, if there are lots of people watching, they're instilling fear in as large of an audience as possible. So taking videos, if you want to just give them to the police right away, good. If you're going to then post about it, make Twitter posts, anything on social media, that spreads the terrorist message. So not feeding into that, not allowing them to have all of that rumoring that goes on afterwards. Hey, I heard they did this. I heard they did this. Did you see that video? Hey, did you see what it was that they did? I've heard that they've been growing and growing and growing and expanding. That's not good. So when people are able to propagate that message, then you're actually feeding into their attack, because a lot of terrorists, they do something that's a smaller attack, but they know that they're going to get a really big reaction by doing it in that area where everyone's going to be watching and really spreading that message. So we want to put an end to that. So lastly, we want to have some engagement from the audience. So stories. So for example, there is the historical Boston Marathon bombing. I'm sure that you all know about it, but do you know more about the family members? So the mother of Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was Zubaydat. I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, so I'm sorry if I'm not. She had actually been radicalizing herself, and so she started going to the mosque more frequently. She started frequenting with people who were saying a lot of really extreme views and ideologies, and it was actually her who started to force the rest of their family down that path, whether or not she intended to. Next was the father. He divorced his wife because she had adopted such radical views, and instead of reporting her, he did nothing. Catherine Russell is the wife of Tamerlan, who had said that she had actually been Christian, and she converted to their radical ideology, started wearing the hijab, started going to this radicalized mosque very, very frequently. And she was actually there when he had been planning his attacks and everything like that, and did not say anything. So does anybody know what was it that these people could have done? What do you think these people could have been able to do to prevent this radicalization process? Any ideas? Yes.
Well, I guess like the father, instead of pulling away and divorcing and not saying anything, maybe he could have A, tried to intersect the radicalization, and B, so that could have been his direct approach, and then otherwise he could have involved the authorities or whoever he thought should have intervened.
Awesome. Anyone else? No? Okay. So our next story is about Katie Genovese. She is actually the woman who inspired the term the bystander effect in psychology. She had been walking around, going home to her New York apartment when all of a sudden she was grabbed, taken aside, and this man stabbed her multiple times. The police reports after the fact said that 40 to 50 of her neighbors heard her screams and did nothing. Nobody called the police. Her death actually could have been prevented, and nobody did anything because it was a diffusion of responsibility. People assumed that somebody else must have called the police by now. Nobody did anything to save this woman. So what was it that these people could have done if they didn't want to run down themselves in order to help? Yes.
Call the police.
Anything else?
They also could have shouted out the window that they had called the police in hopes of scaring them.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll actually be talking a little bit more about Kitty Genovese soon. Can anybody name any other examples of bystanders that could have done something and didn't, or that did do the right thing? Yeah.
I know I did a project on the 9/11 suicide bombers, and 3 out of the main 4 that led the plane bombings, their roommates knew that they were being radicalized by this mosque in Germany, and there were interviews after 9/11, and they were all saying yeah, we noticed he just stayed in his room, he stopped hanging out with us, he started being really rude to our families. He tried to get us to come with him, that kind of stuff, and they didn't do anything.
That's a really good example. Does anyone else have another example? Yeah.
I think during the Orlando shooting, one of the victims had got shot or something like that, and they were outside, and one of the bystanders one of the people that were running out as well saw them and stopped to do something, and I think try to stop the bleeding that was happening at the moment, being that there was no other there weren't paramedics or anything around, so that's something that they did in the midst of chaos, in the midst of that terrible situation, they stopped and did something.
Excellent. Anybody else? Dr. Ad?
Historically, I'm too on the spot. No, sorry.
Okay, so we'll leave you with those. And now a little bit about.
I believe campus resources. Okay. So as you guys talked about terrorist attacks, we talked about radicalism and extremism, but these warning signs and intervention methods can really be applied to any situation that you see your friend or family member is in, such as abuse, bullying, discrimination, and the list goes on. So we wanted to list some campus resources that you could go to if you weren't sure how to deal with the situation. So the first one is called CARE, which stands for Campus Advocates Respond and Educate to Stop Violence. And this is run through the University Health Center. It's actually on the ground floor. And they help people deal with incidents of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sexual harassment. And their main mission is to just educate the community on the issues and also empowering people to act. So it's very similar to our mission. So we're going to actually hand out sheets of paper with their email and websites of all these organizations so you guys have a way to contact them. The next one is a program run out of CARE, out of their office, and this is specifically for bystander intervention. They have a workshop that's geared towards all the topics that I listed before, and by next fall they're actually going to make it mandatory or they're working on it, for all freshman students at UMD to go through this workshop before they go into start school as an undergrad, because unfortunately a lot of this stuff happens on college campuses. A third one is the Help Center. So the Help Center is a peer counseling and crisis intervention hotline where you can anonymously speak in confidence to counselors about anything that you would like to talk about. So this is good for people who are nervous about getting their friend in trouble, nervous about having their name attached to something that they report. This is a great way. They also have walk-in counseling and free pregnancy tests, which is also useful for students. And this is their information as well. Okay, so the next one is accountability services. This just gives a lot of health and wellness services specific to this group of people. And unfortunately, as the crime rate rises for people in the LGBT community, discrimination, bullying, stuff like that, this can be increasingly more and more helpful. And finally, the campus chaplains are a great place to go, especially for people who are more religious or who put more trust in their religious leaders. We have chaplains from all different faiths, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and so on. On the website, they list all the people, emails, phone numbers, how they can help, different programs. So they're a really good resource as well. So now we're going to talk about the two components of our project, which is the social media component and the game we're developing.
So the game that we're developing is called Operation Genovese, which is after Kitty Genovese, which we spoke about a little bit earlier. And the game itself came from our idea from last semester's class. And so we wanted to be able to disseminate information to the public in a fun way that they didn't feel like the government was kind of trying to feed them information, because people tend to be resistant to taking information from the government, whereas if they feel that it comes from different sources that are equally as reputable, then they're much more interested in learning from it. So we wanted to create a game that would allow people to learn how to intervene, when to intervene, and what the best way to intervene is. Because there are definitely times when, for example, direct intervention is not the right way to go, or calling the police is not the way that you can intervene, but there are still ways for you to take measures without doing nothing. So we really wanted to be able to teach people the right ways to act and how to identify those warning signs of radicalization. So we wanted people to learn when it is that something is radicalization or when it's not, and also how they're able to take those steps. What are different things? We want people to also be much more vigilant of their surroundings. So that doesn't necessarily mean snooping and surveillance. We don't want anybody to be looking around their friends' computers to see what it was that they were doing. But you can also be paying a lot of attention to your family members and to people around you. One of the examples that we gave last semester during our presentation was that, you know, a son could be coming to the kitchen table and saying, I can't eat with you anymore, you have alcohol at this table, and I do not approve of drinking alcohol or being at the table. And so you can take various appropriate actions in order to counteract that. You can say, oh, he's just going through a phase, you know, we're just going to pass it by and not really pay attention. Or you're able to say, okay, well, how about we compromise? And you can take that approach instead of going entirely one way or entirely another way. So we want to teach people that appropriate set of actions. It's going to be a choose your own adventure meets escape the room. And so we want people to be able to go through their lives. If you mess up, then you're going to have fewer things that you're able to do in the future, because just like in real life, if you call the police when all they did was say, I don't want wine at the kitchen table, then you're probably not going to be very effective in trying to discuss anything with them in the future. So we really wanted to be able to address that in a fun way. Our video game that we'll be having come out shortly. It's in the form of a phone app. It's going to be more of a prototype, but we're hoping that we would be able to get more funding to make it into something really exciting in the future. So our next slide will show you just some of the, just kind of reiterate what I was just saying about how we want to be able to help you through our video game.
It's important to note that the scenarios within the video game are actually based on true stories from the people that we interviewed, with a few details that were changed. So hopefully that'll help people understand that these things actually happen, and it's really important to make sure you catch those warning signs. And it's sometimes a slippery slope to really define what the right answer is, because the right intervention method, because everyone's situation is a little different. So what we really want to focus on is, or what we want people to learn from our game, is to pick up on the warning signs and to know how to intervene or who to reach out to. And that's basically what Brittany just said.
So the second part of our campaign is the social media component. So we've tried pushing forward a bunch of different things with it. One of the bigger things that I've probably come around the office a bunch and asked you all is to participate in our Just One Photo campaign. So we want to teach people that it takes just one person to make that difference, just one individual, one conversation, one word, to really make and start that train of events to stop somebody from radicalizing and to help them down a better path. And so we have people holding out the number 1 that is seen here, many different people, also the dog, because it was cute. And we're trying to show that people from many different ages, backgrounds, people from all around the world really want to show their support and recognize that they've heard the call for this movement. Another part of our campaign has been blog posts. We want people sharing their stories about times that they were bystanders, so kind of like what we were doing here with these stories, or to share other things that they've read about in current events. We really want to get that conversation going about it all. We've also been sharing videos of other people's experiments and of TED Talks where people talk about the psychology behind the bystander effect, talk about the psychology of intervening, how people feel or when they do not take action, and how they feel about that too. Why aren't they making an intervention? So those are the biggest parts of our social media. We have multiple sites, so you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and we have a website, and you are also welcome to reach out to us on our email if you ever have any questions, if you want to send in photos, if you find a really cool article, but also feel free to post those things on your own. So the next slide, we have all of that for you. We would also like you to use our hashtags. So hashtag It Takes Just One, which is the name of our campaign, hashtag Just One UND, which is the link for all of our various campaign pages, and then also hashtags Invisible Heroes and Heroes Without a Badge. So those are all of you, anybody who's a hero who does not, have a position as a police officer or someone in the special forces or anything like that. Just regular people walking around who see that something's wrong and say something, because that one time that you say something, you are potentially saving thousands of lives who could have been, destroyed from somebody who went down that bad radicalizing path.
Okay, so just to wrap up, these are our social media handles. They're all very similar, so hopefully people can remember them. Both Facebook and Twitter is /JustOneUMD. TakesJustOne.com is our website. We put a lot of the pictures, the stories, the blogs all in there. So that's more of an in-depth explanation of what we do. And then JustOne.tumblr is our Tumblr page. There's Brittany. So be sure to participate in our campaign. That'll help us a lot. And thank you so much for joining us today.
At this time, if there are any questions, either about what we've shared with you here or about the campaign, about peer-to-peer challenging extremism, whatever you might have questions about, we're happy to answer them. Yes.
So first of all, this was a great presentation, and I loved the concept and idea. One question that I had, because a lot of the bystander stuff that you're talking about here seems to be person to person, is there also an online component to it?
Yes. So the first online component that we thought about was the campaign where we took pictures of people and we reached out to people around the world. But we realized that Facebook, it's difficult to stay anonymous because your picture and name is on there. So that's why we did the blog post, and hopefully we can have sort of an online component on our website where people, maybe a forum type thing, where people can share their stories without necessarily sharing their names or their personal information.
Sure. Maybe just to clarify, is there, do you have additional resources related to online bystander stuff as well?
Oh, as to how
Sorry.
you can contact people? Yeah, so a lot of these websites, particularly, for example, the one from Canada that I was showing you, you're able to send in anything that you see, and you can remain anonymous. Another great way for you to get in contact with people, there are a lot of online chat forums, and you can do that with the health center as well. You're able to send in messages. So there are online forums. We can try to make that available on our website as well, so that people are able to, if you don't feel comfortable calling, or if you're in a situation where the person's right next to you and you need to be able to have that conversation, we'll definitely make that available to you. But yes, there are examples. We just did not put those up here. Yeah. Any other questions?
Guys, could you talk a little bit about, and I know you can't talk in detail, but maybe about some of the people that you met with and interviewed in order to
Yeah.
become inspired for this project?
Yeah, so one of the people that I interviewed, her son had gone off to join ISIS. She had absolutely no idea that anything was wrong in the first place. He was already old enough to be living on his own, so he was a few towns away, and she kind of just got the call that your son has left the country, and he has been killed while trying to join ISIS. So that was one of the things that really inspired us to want to start this campaign. A lot of the people that we spoke to were incredibly grateful that we were focusing on them, because many programs focus on the person who is radicalized or radicalizing themselves. Many times you're trying to talk to that person and find out, well, what could we have done for you? And we kind of reversed that question and spoke to the people on the other side of it and said, what would you have liked to know? What would have been the best for you? A lot of the people we spoke to were also incredibly distressed. They had no real idea of what it was that they could do. They noticed that something seemed to be slightly off, but they didn't know how to take action. So we really wanted to empower people. I don't know if we're able to talk about.
I can talk about a little bit.
Okay.
I'll keep the details vague, but I interviewed someone who's a current student at a United States university, and she's about maybe 1 or 2 years younger than me, so she's my age, she's a student, I could relate to her, and her family member got involved with terrorism without the family knowing. And the only way that they found out that this was happening was about a few years later, after I guess police were monitoring the situation, that they sort of barged into the family house and arrested the family member. So the family was immigrants, and they were really startled. They began to fear law enforcement. They really didn't know what was going on. And all of this was happening under their roof without them really knowing that it was happening. And slowly their family's reputation, as it went into the news, sort of got tarnished. So when she was speaking to me, she really was grateful that we were trying to focus on helping the families of people that are radicalized, because they really had no one to turn to. They didn't know what to do. They were scared, and they just felt really isolated. So she's really happy that we're doing this program, and it's really inspiring to be able to talk to someone, human to human, because you hear about these news articles about people joining ISIS, but when you really meet someone that's your age, it becomes a lot more human and a lot more real. So.
Yes.
So I thought this was great, and I think it's especially great to show off explain the campus resources. When you were doing this research, did you find any resources kind of for the people who aren't on campuses? Because I know a big issue with family members don't want to report their family members, because if they report it to the police, there's really only criminal action. There are no like off ramps to try to help these people. Mm-hmm. So did you find any of that that are
situation? An example is Mothers of ISIS. So any family members who notice that their children or anyone else in their family is potentially moving towards those terrorist organizations, they're able to contact those mothers who have been there themselves. Oftentimes the mothers will respond anonymously because they don't want anyone to know that they were involved, which is why I can't give too many details, but they are happy to speak to anybody who's noticed that family or friends are going in the same direction. We have others on our website. There's Hayat Canada, which focuses on helping families who are in that same kind of a situation. There are a bunch of them under our resources section on our website, so you can take a look at that and learn about a bunch of those organizations. We're constantly updating it with more organizations that we find to really spread out as many resources as possible for the various situations people are going through. Anybody else? Okay, if you ever have any questions, feel free to find me. I'm around the office a lot, working on the Poison database. And Otherwise, you're welcome to shoot us an email, which is not
We did not include.
up there. Well, you can message us on any of these, and our email is just1.umd@gmail.com. I can make that available to you. Before we go, we have some resources to hand out to you, so you can just take one and pass. The one sheet are all of the campus resources that we mentioned before, with a few others added that we didn't initially talk about. And the other sheet is a pamphlet that we had made up for our initial campaign last semester. It talks about some of the various ways that you can recognize radicalization. It also gives you a few organizations that you're able to look up to, and it also just kind of talks about the steps of being an active bystander. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we'll grab some pizza.
Hey guys, regarding the pizza, please do not eat it unless you are in need. There are 2 gluten-free cheese pizzas on the end for people who are actually gluten-free. And then